Shalom, everyone. My name is Peggy. I'm starting to use my maiden name, Jacobson Pardo. I'm bringing to you this study called Re from in the book of Deuteronomy. And the verses go from Deuteronomy 11:26 to chapter 16, verse 17. And the portion is called Re. And so let me share the screen and let's get right into it, because again, this Torah, as I've been saying, is for everyone. And the only way we can truly know what it says is by reading it. I may see it one way, you may see it another way, but God speaks to our hearts and he shows us what he wants us to see each and every week. So let me share the screen. Where are we here? And I will begin reading it. Now it begins with Re, see this day. Now, when we say to our children, see, look, I'm showing you something, pay attention. This is what Moses is saying to us. See this day, I set before you bracha u klala, blessing and curse. I'm not so sure curse is the best translation for klala. It's more warnings. Cursing is, God doesn't curse us. He warns us, just like you warn your children. When you tell them, don't do something. See, I'm telling you, listen, hear me, watch. I'm telling you, do not do that. And we do it. We suffer the consequences. This is what Moses is telling us. Blessing, if you obey. Now here it says, habracha asher tishma'u, if you guard, if you listen, if you hear, if you do el hamitzvot, the commandments. Which mitzvot is he speaking about? To this point, there were only 10. The 10 that were carved by the finger of God in stone, put in the Ark of the Covenant when the Ark was made later on. The only thing that God wrote with his own hand, these 10 commandments, mitzvot, yud, hey, vav, hey, of your God, Elohechem, the Lord your God, asher anochim mitzaveh, which I, anochi is an emphatic I, I'm commanding to you, etchem hayom, this day. And it wasn't only for them, it's for us today. And curse, klala again, warnings. If you do not obey, if you do not do the commandments of the Lord your God, yud, hey, vav, hey, but turn away from the path that I command you this day and follow other gods whom you have not known, whom you have not experienced. The word here is lo yadatem. The word comes from the word, Hebrew word yodea, which has a very intimate understanding. It's very difficult to translate Hebrew into any other language because it's a language of pictures. Now, it says when Adam knew Eve, in other words, they had their first sexual encounter. It was an intimate experience. The word used was yodea. And God wants us to know him, yodea, like I know you as you know me. When you're married and you know that you're with the right person, you know each other. There's a beautiful expression in the African world where they say, when they greet each other, they say, I see you. How beautiful is that? So follow other gods. Now, how do we see that today? I'm not only talking about the gods, the Hindu gods or the Buddha or these type of gods. We have made many gods in this modern era. For some people, it's their children. For some, it's their spouse. For some, it's their education. Each one of us has made our own little gods that we think have more power or are better than our Creator. And we have to ask God to help us. Our Rabbi would always teach us Psalm 139. Search me, O God, know my heart, see if there's any wicked way within me, and lead me into your way. And this is a prayer we should be praying every single day when we wake up. Thank you, God, for a new day. Search my heart. Help me today to make the right choices. When your God, Yud He Vav He, brings you into the land that you are about to enter and possess, you shall pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and the curse at Mount Ebal. If you go online, if you research Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, you will see that to this very day, Mount Gerizim has been blessed. It's beautiful, it's green, whereas Mount Ebal is not. It's barren. It's like a wasteland. Both are on the other side of the Jordan, beyond the west road that is in the land of the Canaanites, who dwelt in the Arava, the desert, near Gilgal, by the terebinths of Moreh. For you are about to cross the Jordan, to enter and possess the land that your God is giving you. He's assigning it to you. It's in the bag. He's already given you this land, but we have to enter, and we are going to have to fight for it. And when you have occupied it and are settled in it, this is so important. Take care to observe all the laws here. Chukim. You remember the chukim are the ordinances, which may not have a true understanding for us. We may not understand why fully. It's like when you ask your parents, why do I have to do this? And you say to them, because I said so. Because you can't possibly explain to them all the consequences of what they're about to do. The same with our God. He gave us chukim, which we may not understand. And the two middle commandments are chukim, 4 and 5. The Shabbat, the Sabbath rest, which was a sign that of his very existence. And the 5th, honor father and mother. They gave us life. He gives us life. If we can't honor them, we will never be able to honor our fathers. So to observe all the chukim and all bekol hamishpatim. These mishpatim are the regulations. Those are the last 5 commandments, the ones for our neighbors. Do not murder them. Do not steal from them. Do not commit adultery with their wives. Do not bring a false report about them. Do not ruin their character. And the last one, do not envy. Do not covet what they have. Be happy for people. These laws and rules that I have set before you this day. These are the hukim and mishpatim that you must carefully observe in the land that the Lord your God, Yud He Vav He, the God of your ancestors. Who are our ancestors? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Moses. All these are our ancestors. Believe it or not, even Noah, even Adam, they're our ancestors. But here, it's speaking to Israel, so that it began with Abram, went down to his son Isaac, and then to Jacob. He's the God of our ancestors, giving us to possess as long as you live on earth. Imagine, to the day we die, we are to carefully observe them, not only in the land of Israel, but wherever we will be scattered. This is very important. You must destroy all the sites at which the nations you are to possess worshiped their gods, whether on lofty mountains or on hills or under any luxuriant trees. You see, our God is going to be telling us we cannot worship anywhere we want. not on some mountain, not on this little hill, not under a tree. The pagans worshiped wherever they were. They make their little altars everywhere. God was slowly taking us away from paganism and bringing us to focus on him, on only him, a God who could not be seen, but we know he's there. Tear down their altars, smash their pillars, put their sacred posts to the fire, cut down the images of their God, obliterating their name from all those places where they had set up their gods to where they could be worshiped. We see that everywhere now. Every time I go into a Chinese restaurant, and I have nothing against Chinese people, I love them and I love their food, but they always have a little Buddha there offering food to their gods. We are not to do that. Do not worship your God, Yud He Vav He, in the same manner. But look only, listen to this, look only to the site, to the place. I'm sure it says Hamakom. Exactly. Hamakom is the place. Look only to Hamakom that your God, Yud He Vav He, will choose amidst all your tribes as the place where God would dwell among us, God's habitation. He can't inhabit any place on this earth because he's spirit, but God would dwell among us in spirit, and he would establish his name there. His name, when we say, it says Shem, Sham, Shemo, Sham, his name there. What we're saying is when you name somebody, when you think of somebody's name, you think of everything that you know about that person. So that's what he's telling us here. His name represents Yud He Vav He, everything about him. Now, he has many names. There's a name called El Shaddai. The word means nurturer. The word in Hebrew for breast is Shad, El Shaddai, my nurturer. There are many, many names for God. There you are to go. Now, we know he was building a Mishkan. He was telling Moses where to build a Mishkan in the desert, and that's where he would meet us. Later, we would build a temple, which, believe it or not, he never asked us to build. King David wanted to build it, but he wouldn't allow him. He allowed his son Solomon, but he never asked for a place. He said no place could contain him. But there, you are to bring your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and your free will offerings, your contributions, your votive and free will offerings, and the first fruit, the bechor, the firstlings of your herd and your flocks. In other words, the very best of everything. Let's say you're invited to go to the President of the United States. You're invited to go to his home for dinner, and you want to bring an offering to him for the honor of being able to be invited to the White House. You're going to go out and buy the best. You're not going to bring your leftovers. You're going to bring the best. How much more do we bring our best when we go to God, when we come before him? Now, these tithes are very special. There are hundreds of places that talk about the tithes in the Bible. I remember when I first returned back to God and became a believer in my God, I was told to go to Malachi 3, and I invite you, read Malachi. That's our prophet, verse 3, because he's telling Israel, you are robbing me. And Israel said to him, how are we robbing you? And it says, in your tithes and offerings. We stopped bringing tithes. Now, what does tithe come from? A tenth. Abraham brought a tenth. When we read the story of Melchizedek, maybe it was Melchizedek who brought a tenth. We're not clear. Isaac brought a tenth. Jacob brought a tenth. So whenever you bring You figure what you're going to give to God. You decide where this is going to go, who is giving you spiritual nourishment. And then you take 1/10 of your income and you give it to that organization. That's why Jews are famous for charity, because we always, from this moment, we have learned to give back. God is saying, just give me 1/10. The 90% you can keep, and you can spend it on what you want, within reason, of course. But the 10th and offerings are to be given to, and we'll see to whom they're going to go, because it's not only to be brought into your synagogues or your churches or wherever you go to worship. It's to be brought in to feed the poor, to help those who are in need, to take care of the Levite, the one who is serving you as a spiritual leader. Together with your households, you shall feast there. Now remember, these offerings, animal offerings, were not killed because God loves the shedding of blood. They were killed because he was taking a perfect animal. We were to bring a perfect animal that we would really suffer for giving. We loved our animals. We loved a flock, and we were taking the best. And with this offering, we were acknowledging before the high priest, before the priest who was serving in the temple, before God, that we had done something wrong, unintentionally, because there was no offering for intentional sin that you paid with your life. But here you could come to the temple or the Mishkan, you would bring the best of your flock or the best of your grain or whatever it is you grew, you would bring it. Even if it was a turtle dove, you brought the best and you confessed before God. That's where the Catholic Church gets confession from us. We would go to the high priest and we would tell him what we did wrong. And then he would take the offering. They would sacrifice it in a very humane way. They would pour out the blood, because we were not to drink blood, as we will read later on, a repetition of Leviticus. And we would then, the Levite, the priests, would take a portion and the rest would be shared among the people. They would eat. So we were giving thanks for the food that we were getting. Now it says, you shall feast there before your God. Yud, He, Vav, He. Rejoice, happy in all the undertakings in which your God has blessed you. So remember, everything that in which we have been blessed, the clothes on our back, the food in our fridge, the food in our cupboards, the roof over our head, our decorations. When I look around every day, I say, wow, thank you, God, for your provision. And we should be happy. He wants us to be happy, not to be miserable. You shall not act at all as we act here, each of us as we please, because you have not yet come to the allotted haven that your God is giving you. So he's telling us that we can't just do anything we want. I remember when I started to read, I don't think I ever read the book, but I know that there was what they call the Satanic Bible. And it says, do as thou wilt, do whatever you want. That's not what God is saying. We are not to do whatever we want, but we have to follow his commandments until the day that we will enter the haven that God is providing for you. Here it's talking to the people who are about to take over the land of Israel. But one day there will be a new Jerusalem and a new Israel, the kind of Israel that God will be joyful to dwell among us. Right now it's not so I. Now here again, Moses is saying, when you cross the Jordan and settle in the land that your God, Yud He Vav He, is allotting to you, and God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, and you live in security, remember, he is going to provide that for us, then you must bring everything that I command you to the place where your God, Yud He Vav He, will choose to establish his holy name. You're going to bring your burnt offerings, the other sacrifices, your tithes, your contributions, and all the votive offerings that you vow. When you make a vow to the Lord, you bring extra offerings. We have different kinds of offerings. It ends up being, somebody figured out, about 23% of your income. And when and I search my heart, Lord, where do you want me to give? And I give what God is requiring, not because I'm boasting, but because I know what it does. He said in Malachi, he says, if you will bring your tithes and offering into the storehouses, see if I will not pour out for you all the storehouses from heaven, so that you will not be able to move. You will be so blessed. He's telling us to test him, to try him, test him in this and see. So I did, and I saw, and I continue. And here again, you shall rejoice. He wants us to be happy before the Lord your God, with your children, your sons and your daughters, with your male and female slaves, whether they be Hebrew slaves or Gentile slaves. They were with us, along with the family of the Levites in your settlements, for the Levites were given no territory, so we had to take care of them. Take care not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in any place that you like, but only in the place that the Lord will choose in one of your tribal territories. And there you shall sacrifice your burnt offerings, and there you shall observe all that I command you. So remember, you can't make your own little altars. People do that, only where God commands us. But whenever you desire, you may slaughter and eat meat in any of your settlements, according to the blessing that your God has granted you. Now, this is for all those who are proclaimed vegetarians. Now, you can do what you want, but God gave us meat. He just didn't want us to kill them the way pagans do. He wanted us to have mercy when we kill the animals that he has allowed us to. And there are only certain animals that he allowed to be slaughtered. Why? We may not know until we're with him. But he chose a whole series of meats that we read about in Leviticus that we are allowed to present to him. It says the impure and the impure. In Hebrew, it's the tahor and the tameh. The impure is tameh and the pure is tahor. The one who are presentable to God and the ones who are not presentable to God may partake of it. They can eat together, just like the gazelle and the deer. But you must not partake of the blood. We are not to eat the blood. You shall pour it out on the ground like water. Now, this is very important for Jewish people, not to eat blood. I remember when my great-grandparents came to Canada in 1906, they came from Kiev. They escaped Kiev from the pogroms. They had 9 children. Sadly, one named Shandel died aboard the ship. And they were well off in Kiev. Not many Jews could live there, but because they worked for the aristocracy, they were allowed to live right in the city. And I wondered, why would they leave? Why would they go to a strange land, bringing all their children, leaving all their possessions behind? So I Googled it. And if you think we have fake news today, let me tell you, there's fake news at that time, because they believed that the Jews were kidnapping Christian children and using their blood to make matzah. That would have been impossible. It's fake news, totally fake, but people believed it because our Torah taught us, you must not eat blood. Pour it out on the ground. So we would never do that, especially make matzah. We make matzah with it. Impossible. You may not partake in your settlements of the tithes of your new grain, or wine or oil, or of the firstlings of your herd and flocks, or of any of the votive offerings that you vow, or of your free will offerings or your contributions. Again, emphasizing our offerings. Always bring our best when we go. If you go to someone's house, bring your best. Don't bring the leftovers. If you go to God, bring your best. And all these best, you must eat them, consume before the Lord your God in the place that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, will choose. Why does he repeat the same thing over and over? Because we're stiff-necked. How often do you have to tell your children over and over to do the same thing or not to do the same thing? God is the same. You, your sons, your daughters, your male and female slaves, the family of the Levite in your settlements, happy. He doesn't want us to be miserable. He wasn't calling for asceticism where we have to whip ourselves on the back or not be able to eat. And talk about that. Yom Kippur has been made into a day of fasting, but it wasn't like that in the Torah. It was a day of feasting. We make up our own rules and regulations. And God says, you'll see very soon what he says, do not add or take away anything from the word of God. That's why it's so important to read this Torah. Don't just listen to what other people say. It says, read it for yourselves. Now, I studied at the feet of my rabbi for 32 years before he passed away. But his teachings are still very much alive and online, and I listen to them every week. And he always said that. Say yes to God, say no to religion. If a tradition brings us closer to God, wonderful, keep it. If it doesn't, throw it out. And we all can get caught up in all our traditions, making them more important than the word of God. Here it says, be happy before the Lord your God in all your undertakings. If you're a janitor and you're sweeping the floor, be happy. If you're a speaker, speaking to thousands of people, be happy. Bring joy, bring the light to people. Be sure not to neglect the family of the Levite as long as you live in your land. Take care of the Levite because he had no territory of his own. When Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh enlarges your territory as he promised, and you say, I shall eat some meat, for you have the urge to eat meat, you may eat meat whenever you wish. If the place where the Lord your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, has chosen to establish his holy name, if it's too far from you, like when there was a temple and you live way on the outskirts, if it was too far to go there during the time of the offerings, you may slaughter any of the cattle or sheep that the Lord gives you, as I have instructed you. In other words, Moses was going to tell us how to kill these animals in a very humane way so that they did not suffer. The God is a God of mercy, and the pagan religions were absolutely merciless. When you read some of the ways that they killed their animals, it was horrendous, and God wanted us not to do that, to move away from that. You may eat to your heart's content in your own homes, in your own settlements. What does it say here for homes? It looks like B'sharecha, in your gates. B'chol ot, ut. No, avot, b'chol avot nafshecha. Eat to your heart's, your soul's content. Eat it, however, as the gazelle and the deer are eaten. I'm not sure what that means. I'll have to look that up. I'm sorry. I did not have that time to take a look at it. I might have looked at it, but I don't remember. Anyway, I'll look at it. And if you're interested, come back to me and ask me the question or do a little research on your own. I can't feed you everything, as our rabbi would say. Take a little initiative. The impure, those who are not presentable before God, tameh, may eat it together with the pure, with those who were presentable to God. Someone who is not presentable to God has not gone to God to ask for forgiveness. They know they did something wrong. They have not asked for forgiveness. God will not accept them. If you think that you can be disobedient to God and do whatever you want and still go to him at any time without cleaning your heart, you're not. You can't. Make sure that you do not partake of the blood, for the blood is life, and you must not consume the life with the flesh. You must not partake of it. You must pour it out on the ground like water. You must not partake of it in order that it may go well with you and with your descendants to come, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You see, this reminds me of the commandment where it says, we will be punished for the sins of the fathers unto the third and fourth generations. So here it's talking about maybe several generations back, some of our ancestors decided they were going to eat blood, and things did not go well in their lives. And you can't understand why you have these family curses. Well, we are the generation that can break that. Third and fourth generation means a limited period of time until God opens your eyes and you don't do it anymore. And then you will continue to do what is right and break that curse. But such sacred and votive donations as you may have shall be taken to you to the site that the Lord will choose. You shall offer your burnt offerings, both the flesh and the blood, on the altar of your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and of your other offerings. The blood shall be poured out on the altar of your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and you shall eat the flesh, not the blood, the flesh. We all love a good barbecue. Be careful to heed. What's the word heed? Shamata. Listen, Shema, hear, O Israel. When we say hear, we mean do. He means do. Listen to all these commandments. Hadivarim, the words. Ha'ele, these words. Asher anochi mitzavcha, that I am commanding you. Listen to all these words. The 10 commandments are also called 10 words, 10 statements, they are not suggestions, they are commandments. Thus it will go well with you and your descendants after you forever, unto the 1,000th generation means forever. For you will be doing what is good and right in the sight of your God. If we think that somebody else can pay for our sins and we do not heed his 10 commandments, we are fooling ourselves. The only way we could believe that is if we get rid of the Torah, because he says God does not change. He says, don't add or take away from my words. Which words? These words. Be careful to heed, obey all the commandments for it to go well with you. But you want it to go well and it's not? Turn your life around. Start obeying the commandments. Start going to God. Tell him what you're doing wrong and ask him to help you. When your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, has cut down before you the nations that you're about to enter. Remember, it's God was cutting down the nations in the land that we were about to enter and dispossess and possess. Dispossess, and you have dispossessed them and settled in their land. So remember, God is going to do it even though we have to. We are his partners. We do it together. But be careful, he says, beware of being lured into their ways after they have been wiped out before you. Do not even ask about their gods, saying, how did those nations worship their gods? I'm also going to follow those practices. How many of us, I know I did, how many how often I was involved when I was in the New Age and looked into Hinduism and Buddhism and all these isms. God does not want us to follow those practices. You shall not act thus to be toward the Lord your God, for they perform for their gods every abhorrent act that Yud He Vav He detests. They even offer up their sons and daughters in fire to their gods. They give their children as offerings to their gods. How can we, there are ways of relating that to today, but that's almost a whole lesson by itself. And if any of you want to have more ideas, just send me an email and I'll answer you. I'll be glad to answer from what I know. Be careful to observe only what I command you. Do not add, do not take away from it. That is so important. He said that also in another book in I think it was in Leviticus, it was in Exodus. Do not add, do not take away from God's words. How do we add? How do we take away? Oh, in so many ways, it's almost impossible. It would take me an hour just to explain. One of the ways is by changing the Sabbath to Sunday. That's adding, taking away. They took away from the first commandment where it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, have no other gods. They removed the whole first part and they say, have no other gods. This way they could create whatever God they wanted. And we were to have no other gods, but their created God. Be careful. Now this one, when I first read this, no, it was Deuteronomy 18. That'll get to you in maybe next week. If there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner, someone who reads dreams, who gives you a sign or a portent, which is like a message. How many of us are looking for messages? We go to all kinds of prophets and we say, let us follow and worship another God whom you have not known, even if the sign or the message named comes true, because remember, in the spiritual realm, they can be given messages. But always, if it goes against the Torah, do not listen to the words of that prophet or that dream diviner. For your God, Yud He Vav He, is testing you to see whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul. How often are we tested? Even simple things like, you don't really need to keep the Sabbath. Come on, we're going to the restaurant today. I'm going to introduce you to some people. You could talk to them about your God. Yes, I can talk to them about my God every other day but the Sabbath. The Sabbath is not my day to go to a restaurant. Because he said, do not make any money or have anybody else make money on the Sabbath. It is your God, Yud He Vav He, alone whom you should follow, whom you should honor, revere him, whose commandments you should observe, whose orders you should heed, whom you should worship, and to whom you should hold fast. Now, the word worship doesn't mean you get down on your hands and knees before God or you raise your hands up to the heavens. Look at the word in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's avodah. The word for avodah is work. The priests, the high priest, all the Kohanim would work in the temple, would work in the Mishkan. The original word in the English was workmanship, and it was changed to worship. There's nothing wrong with worshiping God with our songs, with our praises, with our prayers, but we need to act. As for that prophet or dream diviner, and there are plenty of them today, Everyone says, oh, I heard this. Oh, I have a word of this. Oh, God told me this. We have to be very careful because it says, such a one shall be put to death for having urged disloyalty to your God, Yud He Vav He. Be careful when you worship anybody else but the Lord our God. Don't worship any speaker, any spiritual leader, any diviner. Oh, there's so many. And I was caught up in all of it. It almost destroyed my life. Honestly, I almost lost my life. Who freed you from the land of Egypt and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the path that the Lord your God commanded you to follow. Thus you will sweep evil from your midst. It breaks my heart how much of that is in the land of Israel today. Even the Baha'i Temple, all the Jews who run to Israel, not to Israel, the Israelis who run to India and bring back all their practices from that land into our land, which is supposed to be kadosh, holy. If your brother, your own mother's son, or your son or daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your closest friend entices you in secret and says, come, let us worship other gods, whom neither you or your ancestors have experienced. Oh, I had that happen to me so often. Come, you have to listen to this one. You have to listen to, I can't even remember the names anymore, thank God. From among the gods of the people around you, either near to you or distant, anywhere from one end of the earth to the other, do not assent or give heed to any of them. Show no pity or compassion, and do not cover up the matter. Don't do it in secret. Don't hide it. But take that person's life. Of course, we can't do that today. God will do that. Let me tell you, if we don't, we will suffer. Let your hand be the first to put that person to death, followed by the hand of the rest of the people. In those days, they could do that. Today, we cannot. Stone that person to death for having sought to make you stray from your God. This is taken literally in the Middle East, where Islam stones people to death for taking the name of their God in vain, which is, God never meant that. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. He's the only one. Did Allah take our people out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage? Did Jesus Christ take our people out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage? Some may say yes. It's not what the Torah says. Thus, all Israel will hear and be afraid, and such evil things will not be done again in your midst. If you hear it said of one of the towns that your God, Yud He Vav He, is giving you to dwell in, that some scoundrels from among you have gone and subverted the inhabitants of their town, saying, come, let us worship other gods, whom you have not experienced. This reminds me of the verses in the book of Maccabees, in the apocryphal writings, where young Jewish men living in Israel at the time of the Maccabees, at that time it was Antiochus who was coming to take over Israel, the Greek kingdom, with all their gods. And these young men said, come, let us go and join with these people. And right after that, we read about all the disasters that came upon us. We have to be careful when we do those things, because our God will not allow it, especially in the land of Israel. So we were to go and investigate and inquire and interrogate thoroughly. If it's true and it's factual, it's established, that abominable thing that was perpetrated in your midst, put the inhabitants of that town to the sword and put its cattle to the sword, even the animals. Doom it and all that is in it to destruction. I think that abominable things were done even to the poor animals. Gather all its spoil into the open square and burn the town and all its spoil as an offering, a holocaust to your God, Yud He Vav He. And it shall remain an everlasting ruin, never to be rebuilt. We saw that of Sodom and Gomorrah. Excuse me. Let nothing that has been doomed stick to your hand, in order that the Lord may turn from a blazing anger and show you compassion, and in compassion increase you, as he promised, an oath to your fathers. For you will be heeding your God, Yud He Vav He, obeying all the divine commandments that I command you this day, doing what is right in the sight of your God. Why do you think it's so difficult to be a follower of the one and only God? Because the whole world is not. They are doing things their own way. So when we every single day have to make decisions about how we are to behave, and we're going against the tide, it's like the salmon swimming upstream. Let me tell you, we get browbeaten. You see what the salmon looks like after they've swum upstream. For you are a child of your God, Yud He Vav He. You shall not gash yourself or shave the front of your heads because of the dead. These were pagan rituals. For you are a people set apart to your God, Yud He Vav He. He's the only one. There's only one creator for Jew and Gentile. Your God, Yud He Vav He, chose you from among all the peoples on earth to be a treasured people. We were Am Segula, a treasured people. You shall not eat anything abhorrent. Now, it's very important for us to understand here that God is separating us from the rest of the nations, because we were part of the nations, and he took us and separated us. But how would we be made separate from these other people? How would they recognize that we were separate? First, by the things that we ate. There are animals that we may eat, and then it names them all. And then the following, and then there are animals which we may not eat. Fish that we may eat, and fish that we may not eat. Birds that we may eat, and birds that we may not eat. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can read this on your own. But listen to how this portion ends. Because remember, God is speaking in pictures. Some things we're taking literally, but they were not always meant to be taken literally. And we don't know why he chose those animals at that time. Because look what it says here. You shall not eat anything that has died a natural death. Give it to the stranger in your community to eat, or sell it to a foreigner. What kind of a God is it that says, oh, you can eat this, but the stranger can't? No, you can't eat something that's died. Like you can't eat roadkill, or you can't eat anything that has died a natural death, but you can give it to them. We were so small amidst a huge amount of people who don't belong to Israel. Would he want to poison them? It had nothing to do with that. For you are a people consecrated, separated to your God. He was separating it in a way that others would recognize. It was not a judgment on what we could eat or couldn't eat. It was a way of separating us. And then immediately it says, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Our rabbis, our beautiful rabbis, have created an entire section in the Talmud about why we cannot eat milk with meat from this one verse. And it had nothing to do with eating milk and meat. It had to do with a ritual, a pagan ritual, because the pagans had a ritual of fertility. They would take a calf, that was nursing at its mother's milk really wrench it away from the mother, as if the mother had no feelings. We did not understand that this animal had to be treated with compassion. So here they had to take this calf away. The calf was then killed and boiled in its mother's milk, and whoever would drink that milk would become fertile. That's what they believed. So basically what God is saying, I am separating you. You are not to do what the pagans do. And we will be able to recognize that you're different because you don't do those things. You're going to eat differently and you're going to dress differently for a time, for the time that was in the Bible. It wasn't meant for today. You can believe it or not. It's up to you. Today, we need to the way that people are going to know that we are different is if we hold our light up, like Yeshua told us. Don't hide your light under a barrel, but let all see your light. And what does it mean to be light? To keep his commandments. Because when we keep his commandments, he will bless us and we will shine for him. You will set aside every year. This is an extra tithe. Every year, 1/10 of all the yield. So once a year, maybe I need to start doing this. I do it 3 times a year, but this is an extra one. Every year, 1/10 of all your yield that is brought in from the field. Oh, you shall consume these tithes of your new grain and wine and oil and firstlings of your herds and your flock in the presence of your God, in the place where he will choose to establish his holy name, so that you may learn to revere your God forever. Should the distance be too great for you? Should you be unable to transport them because the place where your God has chosen to establish his holy name is far from you, and because your God has blessed you, you can convert it into money. All your stock, your flocks, the best, you could sell them. You wrap up the money. You take it with you to the place your God has chosen. You spend the money on anything you want, cattle, sheep, wine, any other intoxicant. In other words, you can get drunk that day, anything you may desire, and you shall feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and rejoice with your household. But do not neglect the Levite in your community, for he has had no hereditary portion as you have. Repeats it over and over again. Every 3rd year, you shall bring out the full tithe of your yield, but leave it within your settlements where you're living. Then the Levite, who has no heritage, like you have, and the stranger who's living among you, and the orphan and the widow in your midst, in your settlements, shall come and eat. We were taken care of. This is pure religion. This is what God wants from us. To take care of the Levite, our spiritual leaders, the stranger, the ger with us, the orphan, and the widow. We are responsible for them so that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, may bless you in all the enterprises that you undertake. My goodness, how much clearer can it be? Every 7th year, this is the Shemitah. You shall practice remission of debts, Shemitah. In other words, you forgive the sins. If somebody owes you, if somebody owes you money, every 7th year, you forget it. You let it go. Believe me, you won't miss it. This shall be the nature of the remission. All creditors shall remit the due that they claim from their fellow Israelites, but they shall not dun their fellow Israelites or kin for the remission proclaimed. You may get it back from the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due you from your kin. In other words, someone who is part of your own people, you forgive them their sins. That's why we have interest-free loans. We do not charge interest, but from the stranger. And this isn't the ger. This is not the ger that lives among us. This is the foreigner who's really not interested in being part of us. There you're allowed to charge interest, and there you don't forgive their sins. There shall be no needy among you, since your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, will bless you in the land that your God has given you as a heritage. If only you heed, listen, obey your God, and take care to keep this instruction, his mitzvah, his 10 commandments that I command you today. For your God will bless you as promised. You will lend to many nations, but they will not lend to you. You will dominate many nations, but they will not dominate you. It's not the way it is today, because we are not faithful. If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin, in any of your settlements, in the land that your God is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy relative. If you know of somebody in your family who is needy and you have plenty and you don't help them, God will require it of you. It says you must open your hand and let whatever is sufficient to meet the need. Beware lest you harbor the base thought. The 7th year, the year of remission, is approaching, so that you are mean. It says you have, the word is ra, ayin ra. You have an evil eye. The evil eye does not mean, it wasn't meant to be like a curse or what's the word? Superstitious. You know, I know you do something against the evil eye, they put a blue pearl. It has nothing to do with that. When Yeshua said, the lamp of the body is the eye. So when your eye is good, it means generous. Your whole body is full of light. When your eye is bad, your whole body is full of darkness. In other words, when you're generous, you give light. When you're stingy, you're dark. And Yeshua was always bringing us back to Torah. This is what he was talking about. So that you are mean and give nothing to your needy kin, who will cry out to God against you, and you will be guilty. Give readily and have no regrets when you do so. For in return, your God will bless you in all your efforts and in all your undertakings. So don't be stingy. Give. For there will never cease to be needy. There will always be poor among us in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy relatives in your land, or your kin. If a fellow, if a fellow Hebrew man or woman is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. Now, he was teaching us slavery was a way of life at that time. And he wasn't going to get rid of it all at once, because we were living in foreign lands. So we live in the land where there is slavery, but he was going to show us how to treat the slaves properly. We were not to treat them like the pagans treated their slaves. They would be more like servants, and we would be fully responsible for them. When you set him free, do not let him go empty-handed. Furnish him from your flock, the threshing floor and vat, which the Lord your God has blessed you. In other words, give him enough so that he could start again. Bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, redeemed you. Therefore, I command you this day. But should he say to you, I do not want to leave you, for he loves you in your household and is happy with you, take an awl, put it through his ear on the door, and he shall become your slave forever. Do the same with your female slave. When you do Set either one free. Do not be sad, for in the 6 years you've been given double the service of a hired worker. Moreover, your God will bless you in all you do. You shall consecrate, set apart to your God, all male firstlings, the best, the Bechor, the first fruits that are born in your herd, the best of the herd, and in your flock. You must not work your firstling ox or shear your firstling sheep. You and your household shall eat it annually before your God in the place that Yud He Vav He will choose. If it has a defect, lameness, or blindness, any serious defect, you shall not sacrifice it to your God. Just bring him the best. Eat it in your settlements. The impure among you no less than the pure, just like the gazelle and the deer. Only you must not partake of its blood. You shall pour it out on the ground. Again, we hear it over and over. Now, this is the beginning of the first month of the year. Observe the month of Aviv, also known as Nisan. Aviv means spring. In the spring, at Nisan, we're to offer the Pesach. The Pesach to the Lord your God in the month of Aviv at night, the night that your God freed you from Egypt. You shall slaughter the Pesach for your God from the flock and the herd in the place where Yud He Vav He will choose to establish his holy name. Do not eat anything leavened with it. Leaven represents pride, and God wants us to get rid of the pride that destroyed Pharaoh. Yeshua was constantly speaking about humility, to humble ourselves before God. For 7 days, you shall eat unleavened bread. We get all the pride out of our system, the bread of affliction, remembering that we departed from the land of Egypt in hurry, so that you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt as long as you live. This story of Egypt is so crucial to the history of our people because it has been repeated throughout the ages. We have to remember we were in a foreign land. There was a king, a pharaoh, whose pride tried to destroy us because we had multiplied, because we were successful, because he was afraid we were going to turn against them. And we were forgetting our God because we were enamored with the gods of Egypt. So God had to come and set us free. This has happened over and over in our history. For 7 days, no leaven shall be found with you in all your territory. In other words, don't sell it to the Gentiles because the Gentiles need to keep it with us. And none of the flesh of what you slaughter on the evening of the first day shall be left until morning. There was no refrigeration. So when you had some food, you got to eat it all. You are not permitted to slaughter the Pesach in any of your homes, in any of the settlement that your God has given you, but at the place where the Lord your God, Yud He Vav He, will choose to establish his holy name. There alone shall you slaughter the Pesach at evening, at sundown, the time of day when you departed from Egypt. You shall cook it and eat it at the place that the Lord your God will choose, and in the morning you may start on your journey home. After eating unleavened bread 6 days, you shall hold a solemn gathering for your God on the 7th day. You shall do no work. So we see after eating it on the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall count off 7 weeks, and then we get to the next holiday, which is Shavuot, starting, or what as the Christians call Pentecost, but it's because it was 50 days after Pesach. Start to count the 7 weeks when the sickle is first put to the standing grain. It was the beginning of the harvest. It was the barley harvest. Then you shall observe the Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, for your God, offering again a free will contribution according to how God has blessed you. There were 3 of those. These were called Shalosh Regalim, the 3 feast pilgrim festivals when we would send up to Jerusalem. The Pesach, which he spoke about, the Shavuot, and last is the Sukkot, where each time, those 3 times a year, we take a look at what we have, we take a tithe, and we give it as a free will offering. You shall rejoice before your God with your son, your daughter, your male, female slave, the Levite in your communities, the stranger, the orphan, the widow in your midst, at the place where the Lord your God will choose to establish his holy name. Remember, bear in mind that you were slaves in Egypt. Don't ever be proud about where you are, because believe me, you could lose it overnight. Remember, we were slaves in Egypt, and take care to obey these chukim, these ordinances, which we may not always understand. And the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat, you shall hold the Feast of Booths, Sukkot, for 7 days. You shall rejoice in this festival with your children, the male, female, slaves, the Levites, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. We should rejoice together. Don't say your God is one, you have your God and we have ours. There's only one for all of them. You shall hold a festival for your God 7 days in the place. And every day we were to rejoice under the sukkah and invite people in the place that the Lord will choose. For your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, will bless all your crops and all your undertakings, and you shall have nothing but joy. That's what he wants from us. Oh, halavai. 3 times a year, on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Booths, all your male shall appear before your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, in the place that God will choose. Do not appear before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh empty-handed, but with each his own gift, but each with his own gift, according to the blessing that your God has bestowed upon you. Oh, excuse me. Every week, every time I read them, I think how powerful these messages are. So I hope you enjoyed this reading. I know I enjoy it every week. I've learned so much. I look forward to Shabbat and hearing the message. I've already listened to the message from my rabbi, and now I'm looking forward to listening to a message from another speaker in our community. Be sure to forward this to your friends, to your relatives. We need to learn this. It's the only way that we will have peace on this earth. So I wish you all the best, and I look forward to next week when we look at Shoftim. Good night, good afternoon, good morning, depends when you're watching.